If you are not familiar with the goings on of our chamber today, it's a very busy day in the greater Susquehanna Valley, which is a great thing. In addition to this lovely presentation, we currently have a table and a tent set up courtesy of UPMC at the Lewisburg Farmers Market, where we've been welcoming the new neighborhood beer garden. So if on Wednesdays over the next 12 more weeks, you're interested in checking out the farmers market, stop on by the Chamber's tent and UPMC's and come and connect with us. Additionally, today is National Food Truck Day. If you're not already connected to a food truck, any excuse for a big guy like me to go and enjoy food truck dining, I think that's the way to rock and roll. So we are actually hosting the barbecue, Iron Barbecue, I think is the name of it, food truck. They are right out front of the building, and Karen Good State Farm is currently hosting a welcome tent there. So there's lots to do in the Valley. And with that, I'm gonna get us started. So it is my absolute pleasure today to welcome you to our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion webinar. We're calling it a lunch and learn, but lunch is on you this morning. But we're really excited for this presentation. Penn State World Campus has been a fabulous partner for us. And in that vein, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Janine Wonderling. Janine has partnered with the Greater Susquehanna Valley Chamber for a number of years now, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about that as we conclude our program today. But Janine is the Assistant Manager for Penn State World Campus Education Alliance programs, where she provides leadership to a team in building and maintaining strong relationships with Penn State's corporate education alliance partners, and she assists in making connections for corporate partners with the university. She has a Master of Science in Workforce Education and a Bachelor of Science in Biology, both from Penn State University. And at this time, I'm going to have Janine welcome our two guest speakers. Take it away, Janine.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. Chris, I see you must have visited my LinkedIn page. Thank you, all of you from the Greater Susquehanna Valley Chamber of Commerce staff and members. We welcome you to this presentation. We're happy, that you're able to be here to discuss more with us this very important topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. I'm very thrilled to introduce the presenters to you this morning. I have with me Karen Armstrong, who is the Director of Inclusion, Equity, and Diversity for Penn State Outreach and Online Education. And I also have Denita Wright Watson, who's the Associate Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Advocacy for Penn State World Campus. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn it over to the two of them to get the presentation started. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Chris. We're glad to be here today. I'm going to just share my screen. Bear with me for a second. Okay, how's that? Can you all see my screen okay?
Perfect.
Okay, great. So Karen and I, like I said, we're really excited to be here to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So thank you for taking time out of your lunch to join us today. So as we go into our presentation, we thought that it would be helpful just to have a better understanding of the terms that we're going to discuss: diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'd like to share with you how these words are defined. These are actually definitions from the Ford Foundation Center for Social Justice. And they're great definitions to kind of guide our discussion today. So diversity is defined as the representation of all our varied identities and differences, meaning race, ethnicity, gender identity, national origin, tribe, caste, socioeconomic status, thinking, and communication styles, for example, collectively and as individuals. And so we know that studies continue to show that the most successful teams are heterogeneous ones. And the key to teams the key is having teams that are made up of diverse skill sets, backgrounds, and mindsets. So just think about your own teams that you might be on, and just imagine if everyone on that team all thought exactly the same and looked exactly the same, had the same exact level of experience. We know that organizations that are more effective when they recognize the valuable contributions of varying viewpoints, viewpoints from different lenses. And the same stands for cooperative learning groups within our classrooms. So we know that we can be more effective as a team if there are varied lens. I don't think any of us would want to be on a team where everyone thought exactly the same. There's no innovation in that. You can't come up with new ideas, new approaches to problem solving if everyone is coming from the same place. Equity. So equity seeks to ensure fair treatment, equality of opportunity, and fairness in access to information and resources for all. When we think about equity, a lot of people connect equity with being equal. And I like to kind of explain the difference between equity and equality. So imagine if Karen and I gave each person on this webinar a pair of size 7 shoes, a pair of size 7 regular width shoes. So that would be an example of equality because we've given you all the exact same thing, the same pair of size 7 regular width shoes. But equity would be if we gave you all the correct size and the correct width to suit your specific needs. Unless you wear a perfect size 7 regular width, it would be very hard for you to function, in a pair of shoes that are too small or too large or too narrow or too wide for your foot. So equity is providing everyone with the tools that they need to feel whole and supported, which is an ultimate show of respect. We respect you enough to want to give you the tools that you need to be successful and create an even playing field. Now, inclusion builds a culture of belonging by actively inviting the contribution and participation of all people. And this is so important. People often interchange the terms inclusion and diversity. You can have a diverse team, you can have a diverse workforce, but unless you are valuing the contributions that each person brings, unless you are giving each person a voice, then that diversity, you're disserving yourself. You're disserving your organization. You can have a diverse group that has a vast representation of different races, different ethnicities, genders, orientations, abilities, etc. But unless people aren't welcome to use their voice, unless they aren't given the opportunity to be heard, then the environment is not an inclusive one. It is not enough to say that there's diversity on your team or diversity in your organization if the points of view and the experience that everyone brings to the table is not valued. So with diversity comes the opportunity to view matters from a different viewpoint, through a different lens, and to be innovative in problem solving. Therefore, without inclusiveness, an organization is really disserving its members and itself. So I hope that gives a good foundation of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Sorry. So, I'm sorry, I went a little too far. Okay, I'm sorry, there we go. So let's talk a little bit about valuing identities and appreciating differences. So you may have heard someone say, or maybe you've heard yourself say this, that you don't see color. People often say, I don't see color, or, I don't raise my children to see color. And that seemed like a harmless enough, well-intentioned statement. But let's think about that. Let's kind of break that down. If you ignore my skin tone, if you ignore Karen's skin tone, then you aren't really seeing us for who we are, and you aren't seeing us for what we bring to the table and our experiences. It's okay to see color. It's okay to say, I see you, I acknowledge you. Your skin color is different from mine. That it's okay to acknowledge those differences, and we want to embrace those differences, and use that as an opportunity to engage and to learn from one another. And in doing that, it shows that you respect me, you respect what I bring to the table. You acknowledge that, I might see things from a different viewpoint than you, and you're welcoming me to share that viewpoint. So, and while it's okay to acknowledge those differences, we also want to be mindful that we do have a lot in common as well.
The only thing I would add to that is really thinking about your own skin tone, your own identities, what they look like, what they feel like, what you can contribute. When you recognize the differences of someone else, it also opens the door for you to acknowledge your own identities, right? And so suddenly it's not so overwhelming or scary to note some differences when you're acknowledging the identities that matter to you. And so I'd love to hear, and again, I'm really, really, really biased, so I want to put that out there right now, right? But in the chat, if people can share if they identify in any way as a Penn Stater, and I promise we won't like throw tomatoes at you if you don't, or anything like that, but that is part of my identity. That is part of Denita's identity, right? And so even now, if you just, if there are a couple of people who say, yes, I identify as a Penn Stater or somebody who's been part of the Penn State community, I love it. Exactly, right? That we are means something. It's okay, Pitt, you can still stay, but to really think about, who am I? What's my race? What's my ethnicity? What do I believe? Do I have a religious belief? Where do I like to go? What do I like to do? Am I a family person? All of these different identities matter, to Denita's point, right? And it's what makes you who you are and what helps you bring uniqueness to the table. And so as director of inclusion, equity, and diversity, Dickinson, yeah. I hear from people a lot. They will say to me like, well, what about white men? And I'm like, great, I love white men, right? Like, why wouldn't I want white men to belong? Why shouldn't white men own their identities? And I say the same for Black men and Asian, and name every race and ethnicity, right? We are speaking in terms of everyone. And so I encourage people, if you don't know your race, your ethnicity, if you don't think about those roles that really matter to you, take some time, even 10 minutes on your own, get really quiet and think about, what are my identities? What matters to me as an individual? What do I uniquely bring to the table? Another identity that I have, I identify as African American. I also identify as a mom. And uniquely, I am the mom of a person with a disability. That is one of the identities that I know Denita has heard again and again and again. I have an adult son with epilepsy, and advocate in the space for people with disabilities because it's an identity that matters to me. So I share this, not disclosing, because my son advocates in this space too. So I'm not sharing something that he doesn't want people to know about. But I say this to say, learn what identities matter to you so that you know what you bring to the table and can embrace others. And be supportive of what matters to you and learning what matters for other people. And so that falls right in line with what we have on the screen now, which is fostering allyship where you work, live, and play. And so to Denita's point, sometimes before we get to allyship, we've got to first get to the base, right? The bottom denominator, which is tolerance, right? Which is, Denita, you can sit next to me and I won't hit you. I won't call you names. I won't say anything bad to you. I may not talk to you. I may not get to know you, but I will tolerate your sitting next to me. So I'm curious, Denita, when I say that I'm going to tolerate you, what are the feelings? What do you think when I say that?
Tolerance to me sounds like it's almost as if someone is holding your arm behind your back, forcing you to have to deal with me. Like you're doing it as you grit your teeth. You know, tolerating someone is just, it's so, it's the basic, it's the bare minimum just to share space with someone. You know, you're not happy about doing it. You're doing it just to get by because maybe you feel like you have to, or maybe you're being forced to. Tolerance doesn't sound like it's coming from the heart. It doesn't sound like it's something that you're doing at your own free will.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to everybody there, and please don't share circumstances, but in your entire life, have you ever felt like you were tolerated? So I'm also the youngest of 3 kids, and I know as the youngest that there were times my brother tolerated me because my parents said he didn't have a choice, right? That I was going to be his sister no matter what, right? So thank you for sharing that, right? Like, think about those times that you've been tolerated and how that's that bottom denominator, right? Mm-hmm. And we want to always move beyond tolerance, or moments for yourself where you've tolerated another person. Again, I'm using the example as a sibling. I know that there were moments that I only tolerated my brother. I didn't really want him sitting next to me. But again, my parents insisted that we keep him in the car because we were driving, right? So I tolerated him being next to me, but I didn't want him there, right? We've now reconciled those things. We're adults now. So it's okay. But I want you to think about that, even as we move from tolerance to inclusion, right? So it's very different saying, Denita's sitting next to me. I'm going to ask her, what does she think, as we are looking at, a new possibility for diversity, equity, and inclusion for Dickinson, because you were up there, yay, right? If I'm going to talk about what are some things that we can do to really foster inclusion. If I ask her, what do you think, Denita? Share with me your ideas, right? If I say to Chris, who's on right now, hey, Chris, like, tell me, what makes you feel like you belong? Well, now I'm including him in the conversation rather than tolerating him, right? And so understanding that difference. And so when you hear people say, and as you look at it as a commerce, right? Like let's make sure we're tolerant, understanding that that's the bottom denominator, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And moving from there to inclusion and asking input from other people. And once you've had inclusion and you've gotten that input, it's possible to demonstrate the next level, which is allyship. And so I am demonstrating allyship right now. I don't identify as a member of the LGBT community. However, this is Pride Month, and I have family and friends who do identify as members of the community. So I am happy to have up my Pride Zoom background. I am happy to advocate for others who don't have identities that are the same as me. That is what it means to be an ally, to say, where are we different? How can I support you, right? That's an ally. An ally comes behind a person, listens to what they have to say, and then kind of follows those directions. So I'm going to use my role as a mom of a person with a disability. And so my son is an advocate on a national level, right? And so he's often in a lot of spaces where they are talking about things to improve life for people with disabilities. And sometimes I want to just jump in and say, hey, you know what needs to happen? And you know what we should do? And all of these things. But I don't identify as a person with a disability. So not that I can't share my ideas, but I need to first pause and listen to the members of the community, to what they need and what they say, before then sharing and being supportive of what they say that they need, because they can say that they need something that I hadn't even thought about, right? And so it's impactful as an ally to listen. So if you think I want to be an ally, number one is listening to others, hearing what those individuals say. And being an ally can be really simple. Again, it's how do I show support? So for me, and it's the same for Denita, and I know that she's got these Zoom backgrounds as well. And so know that we talked about the background, so it's not just for me. I include her as well. We readily show support for those in the LGBT community. One way that we both do this is Zoom backgrounds. I know, Denita, if you don't mind talking a little bit about your amazing affinity groups and what they do, because I know in the world of business, affinity groups can help retain your employees. So if you can share a little bit about that.
Absolutely, Karen, thank you. So we do have affinity groups at World Campus, and these groups are identity-based affinity groups for our students, and it creates just a safe space for students who share an identity to be able to come together, share experiences, support one another, uplift one another. There's much value in being able to speak with someone who relates to your story. Please don't get me wrong, while it's important that like we said, that you have diversity on your team, that you have people from all backgrounds to come together. That's important, but it's also equally important to give people a space to be able to connect with those that can identify with them. It's a bit of a support system, a support network. It's a space where students know that they will not be judged, where they can be their authentic self, where they can share an experience. And it's very powerful when you share an experience and someone else can say, wow, you know what, I know exactly how you feel. I've had that same experience, and this is how I managed it. This is how I coped with that experience. So these affinity groups, like Karen said, it's a great a great means of retention, where students can realize that they're not alone. There are other students who have a similar background, a similar story. So I would encourage, if you do not have affinity groups with your organizations, I encourage you to explore this idea. Affinity groups can be based on ethnicity, on orientation, on interest. You can base it on just about anything that you think would speak to your members. But these are a great resource, and I think that it would be an excellent support system for your organizations.
Sorry. So to that point, like if you find that you've got employees that don't necessarily mesh, right, that don't necessarily connect. Often in business, they're called employee resource groups. They're exactly the same thing as what Denita is talking about, right? It's a great way to get people talking that may not talk otherwise. Again, as a Penn Stater, one easy way to establish an affinity or an employee resource group, you could do it around Penn State football. Not that I'm biased or anything, but it's a great way to bring community together, right? To think about sports and what interests you, right? You could even have, we've got a group that loves Pitt and we've got a big group that loves Penn State, and, and it's football season and people come together and connect. And suddenly people who weren't talking to each other are talking to each other. And the purpose of these is to build retention, right? Because we all know in business, When you hire somebody, that's an investment, and training them, that's an investment. And to lose them costs you money. So building these employee resource groups, these affinity groups, it helps you from a business perspective, but it also yields a connection to your organization. So it's just something to think about. And as we move to the next slide, we've talked about tolerance, and we've talked about inclusion, and we've talked about allyship, and now we're looking at belonging, right? And so you may hear that term all the time, foster belonging. The affinity groups is one way to do that, but it can feel really difficult, right? Like, so what are we supposed to do in our everyday lives and our everyday work to foster belonging? Give us some tools and strategies. No problem. I would love to do that. Chris, if you can do me a favor and share one of the tools that we use to foster belonging, that would be really awesome.
Karen, should I stop sharing my screen?
Yeah, you probably need to stop sharing. Yeah, sorry about that.
Mhm.
So this is going to be a really cool tool when it pops up, for you to be able to see what we use at Penn State. And if you scroll down a little bit, this is, thank you so much, Chris. This is our diversity calendar. So all of those things that you see coming up on the screen, if you look to your far left, it tells you what they mean. So we've got the stars and religious holidays and historical events. It's easy for us to be inclusive when we plan meetings, when we can go to a calendar and look to see when there are religious holidays that some people can't participate, right? And so we don't want to plan a big meeting during a time that we know is a religious holiday. The same thing, there may be dates that happen that come by. Juneteenth is one of them. Many people at Penn State were like, I've heard of this, but I'm not quite sure what it is. And so our calendar allows for people to click on things, learn information, and be able to gather ways to be inclusive. One of the things that we did this year for Juneteenth was a watch party, where during the lunch hour, if you scroll all the way up to the screen, I'll show you where it says, keep going, right? So these are celebrations for the month of June, and these are national celebrations, not Penn State. So this is a national calendar. And when you click on it, it gives additional information. Again, same thing for Pride Month. And what we did is we showed a national watch party where during the lunch hour, we streamed a video by PBS that gave information about Juneteenth. We did the same thing for Pride Month. We've also got Caribbean Heritage Month. When I tell you what we're doing for Italian and Polish Heritage Months, it's a really cool idea. Our Vice President, Tracy Houston, and our and I can tell you more about the calendar, and our Vice Provost, both happen to have the same month, which is October, which is Italian and Polish Heritage Month. And so they're going to come together and they're going to cook some of their favorite recipes and talk about their heritage, right? And so when I say this is for everybody, I truly mean that. It's an easy way to be inclusive. This happens to be the tool that we use. So how that information, so we went with a vendor, we vetted lots of vendors, but we went with a vendor that has that information, and this is exactly what they do as a company, and they look at being inclusive. If that's something that you're looking at for your company, I'm happy to share additional information on what our process was. I'm just going to put my email in the chat so that you don't have to do the vetting that we did. I can give you names of different vendors. That doesn't mean you need to go by them, but we went through a large process. Part of that reason is because we wanted a calendar that shared all races and ethnicities and every national holiday, right? And so there were some that we found that focused only on people of color, and there were others that didn't include LGBT. We want to be thoroughly inclusive, and so that was our choice in going with this vendor. And that information that you're asking about being compiled comes from the vendor. And so it's made it easy for us to then, we've added our little icons on the side to add information that's specific to Penn State. And again, this is just one example, but the purpose in our doing this is to let people know they belong, is to let people know there are ways that you can plan events, that you can plan your meetings and celebrations around historical events and other aspects, so that people know, oh, you see me, to Denita's point, right? You recognize I identify as this thing, or, again, I'm African American. I love seeing the historical information about those that are African American as well. This is just one tool, but we use it to foster belonging at Penn State for our faculty, our staff, and it's used to develop programming for our students. And so if you're struggling with belonging, know that something like this can make it easy for you to be inclusive, to look at what's out there. These are things that you can also Google. You can Google national holidays and heritage months, right? If you don't want to necessarily purchase a calendar, you can Google what that is. And maybe in your, where you are in your business, celebrate every heritage month that occurs across the United States, right? Just a simple event of recognizing it's Polish American month, right? And that's, just noting it can be inclusive and can foster belonging. And so thank you for sharing your screen, and we will go back to Denita's sharing. And we'll definitely open it up for more questions, because we know that this can seem difficult, right? But from our perspective, it really, really isn't. It is about thinking of ways to open the door to include all others. And so that's why we shared that calendar, because for us, it's a tool to include all others. So we're definitely eager. I can talk a lot. And so we're eager for your questions. If you're kind of stumped, or, we just like to share an identity that matters to you, and you're like, wow, what could we do around that? We're happy to kind of take this moment and discuss that.
Karen, thank you so much. I'd love to kick us off if that's all right. So one of the things the Chamber has talked about is actually affinity groups and employee resource groups. So thrilled to hear you hit on that topic. One of the things that I imagine is a challenge for small businesses is resources for a small staff, and how to continue to populate this type of information for what could be a diverse workforce, but a diverse workforce with limited information. What advice would you give for the small businesses, the mom and pop shops, if you will? And do you see a Chamber of Commerce kind of fitting into that space?
Absolutely. And after I answer Denita, I'd love to hear your perspective. So for the small mom and pop shop, a great strategy is to focus on inclusion and interest, right? Which is why that example was given about sports. If you want to build connection within your staff, and you want the opportunity to expand and really get a diverse workplace, let people know who you are. Nobody has one identity. It's not possible. No one, right? And having those kind of affinity groups builds relationships and gets to know you on a way that you might not in the workplace, right? It's that human part of you, right? It's that part that's like, oh, well, I just learned something new about Janine that I didn't know before. And hey, Chris, I didn't know that, you were into Penn State hockey too, right? And so now we've got conversations happening that weren't happening before. And then the other part is to simply recognize, when we look at diversity, specifically diversity, that find ways to do simple celebrations and acknowledgements, right? So for Martin Luther King Day, even having a sign and a banner up, and it doesn't need to be some big expensive sign, right? But having something that recognizes this day and having it up for the month demonstrates your interest in diversity, right? Simple things like that speak volumes to people that says, oh, so you don't want to just tolerate me, right? You want me to belong. You want inclusion. And that's why those kind of things happen. I've seen people take, you can get them at CVS or anywhere, Staples, large pieces of poster board, those who are artistic decorated, and put something in their window to celebrate MLK Day, right? And they have it up for the month. So we're not talking about things having to be really expensive. We're really talking about the acknowledgement as being impactful and really powerful to help people know you want diversity. And again, interest, if people aren't talking, start with sports and other areas. But Denita, I know this is definitely your space and you see great work in this. So I'm eager to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Karen. I just wanted to just kind of add to what you said. Something that came to my mind, Chris, in terms of the mom and pop shops, the small mom and pop shops. Those shops are normally deeply embedded in communities. They're usually tight-knit communities, where these mom pop shops are located. And so why not showcase these shops and showcase them to places outside of their communities and welcome folks in to explore these mom and pop shops, explore what other resources are in these communities, what other cultural resources there are that maybe someone in the next town over may not even be aware of, what type of gems and jewels lie in this community, the next town over. They may not know about the mom and pop shops or the the museum or the cultural center, or anything that might be in this community. So I would really showcase what these communities where the mom and pop shops are located, what they have to offer. There's so many gems that people don't know about because people tend to stay in their own box. They stay in their own town, or they stay with what's familiar. So I would really play off of that and showcase them for the gems that they are. There's a lot to be discovered in these small towns, small communities.
Thank you so much, Anita. If I can
Please.
I have a follow-up, if that's okay. Which is, I had a lovely conversation. I see that Stephanie Dirk from Geisinger is on the call. She connected me with Chris Grill, who's in the Human Resources division at Geisinger, and he's especially focused on Veterans Affairs. One of the things that I learned in a conversation with him recently was how few companies have veterans-focused employee resource groups, for example. And if we were to, we're discussing whether it would make sense for the chamber to kind of take the initiative to format like a regional employee resource group for employers of veterans, right? Would you recommend that sort of thing, and if so, what would you recommend we start with?
I think that's such a fabulous idea. Go ahead, Denita. Looked like you were, I didn't want
No,
to.
I wholeheartedly think that that's a wonderful idea. And I just think about how we all say, we support our veterans. It's very cliche for people to say they support veterans, but how do we really support them? What are we really doing to open up opportunities and to give them the resources that they need? So I think that that's a wonderful idea. I think that it's often overlooked, the value that veterans bring to an organization, to a company, and I think it's overlooked, the military, how the military skills sets translate to civilian positions, to civilian organizations. So I think that's a wonderful idea that you have to support them. I think that you should definitely go with that.
And I totally agree. And my only other suggestion, you asked before about like what can the Chamber of Commerce do, and leading from that space. So looking at the employee resource group or something similar for military, remembering too that military individuals are also women and people of color, and making sure that that representation of military is inclusive, because everybody's got that commonality, right? of military, but we don't always see images of it being a military woman, right? And so as you look at this, I think it's absolutely fantastic because it transcends race and religion and ability, right? And so many different facets. And so I would encourage you to make sure that you've got a diverse array of images as you foster an environment of inclusion for the military with the Chamber of Commerce, right? And so think about disability and think about race and gender and all of those different aspects, and it all still falls under military. So it's a beautiful thing. So just to consider.
Absolutely. And I was thinking the same thing, Karen, in terms of our disabled veterans. Yes. Mm-hmm.
I was fascinated when I heard you use the word value. And for me, I immediately thought of the play on words that could be value in the valley, right? Which is our greater Susquehanna Valley. But so if we want to be a leader in this as a Chamber of Commerce, or even, the folks on the call who are members in the Chamber, I want to make sure that I could guide them into where these conversations can happen in the workplace. So, I mean, on the one hand, it seems like a staff meeting is when everybody's gathered. What other kinds of recommendations do you have to facilitate diversity, equity, and inclusion in the nitty gritty, in the moment to moment when you're working, perhaps gearing up for something on the calendar, right? But going through your regular your day, your 8:30 to 4:30 day.
Well, one of the things that I would say is as you plan this, you might find it really helpful, and I would not make it really big because it can become cumbersome, but having a group of stakeholders who are regularly meeting to represent your stakeholders and talk about, are we being inclusive and how are we planning for the future? It can become really difficult if you do it month to month rather than what does the year look like? What are some things that we want to recognize and celebrate, so that it also makes it easier for your stakeholders to get involved, to know that you're going to plan a way to demonstrate, just highlighting MLK Day now. It's easier, right, for all who are part of the commerce to get involved just because we're in June. And so I would say having a small committee together and plan it out, right? And that doesn't mean you can't add things, be flexible, but it does become easier when you look at, for the year, what are some things we want to acknowledge and celebrate in order to get it off the ground and moving? And then it makes it easier to have that everyday conversation because it's stuff that you're already doing. And so talking about that is a natural part of what you would discuss anyway. Go ahead, Denita.
And I just wanted to add to that. I think it's also important to give your your members a voice. Let your members tell you what it is that they need to feel supported. Whether you hold a focus group or surveys. I just think that there should be some type of vehicle for members to tell you, what might be lacking, where they see areas that can be improved, what can be done for them to feel more a part of the organization. I think that if you want to know how to reach people, sometimes you just have to come right out and ask them. So I think giving folks a voice is not only helping them to feel included, but it's empowering them to tell you exactly what they need to feel like part of the organization and feel that they really have a voice.
Thanks very much, Denita and Karen. I have asked plenty of questions now. I'm hoping that we've primed the minds of everyone on the meeting here. If anybody wants to jump in, you can feel free to either use the chat or unmute and jump right into this conversation.
Should I stop sharing maybe so that way we can all see one another? Or
that'd be fine, Denita. Thanks.
Sure.
And I do see a question when it comes to someone inside a company giving a diversity and inclusion training, who should present it? That's a really great question. So our practice at Penn State is to really have trained individuals. Denita and I can share with you that we are both trained in this. And when you have individuals who aren't trained, sometimes it gets a little bit complicated in that people can feel like, I don't know what to do and I don't know what to say. And so that's why we do things like this. So that would be my recommendation, is making sure that as you do outreach, having individuals who are well versed in these topics, just like you may have somebody trained in other aspects of your business, like when you look at safety training and other things like that. And there are lots of organizations who also provide this training as well.
Karen covered that beautifully. That's why I didn't feel the need to say anything.
Other thoughts or questions or things that you may be considering that you're kind of like, what about this? We're more than happy to help.
Absolutely.
Karen and Denita, it's Janine. I just wanted to throw this out there. I work with a lot of corporations through the Education Alliance partnership. And in many of those corporations, they have employee resource groups, and both of you discussed that earlier. And sometimes they will actually come to me and say, it might be, I'm just using this for instance, this happened in one of my organizations where it was a Hispanic leadership group. And so that was the employee resource group within that company. What that group, one of their goals they decided was they wanted to increase the number of Hispanic employees that the organization was hiring, or at least have the opportunity to find candidates within that affinity group. And so they contacted me and asked if I would be able to make connections for them. And I did so with like-minded student affinity groups. So, I was able to connect them to resources at the university so that they could network directly with students who met that affinity group that they were really trying to speak to. So that's just another opportunity, that we could help the chamber if there are specific affinity groups or employee resource groups within your companies, or you're interested in starting one and you want to talk to someone. We do have student groups and organizations. And as Denita said, even within the World Campus, we have those affinity groups, and we're more than happy to help build connections for any of you and any of your companies in that area.
Absolutely.
That's so fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that idea, Janine. Thank you. And if you're interested, not even just when it comes to recruitment, but any speaking opportunities, opportunities just to share words of wisdom to our students, anything that you would like to present to them on, I would be more than glad to set that up and to get you in front of our students. If you can speak to our students about maybe your diversity recruitment practices in your companies. What are your companies doing to promote DEI? And, you want to get in front of our students to promote this to them. That's something that I would love to see happen as well. So anything that I can do to connect you with our student population, I'm all for it.
And that's at internships too, right? Internships are a great way if you're looking at expanding your pool and you're like, we just don't get enough diverse candidates. A great thing to do, which are done at universities all across the country, is do outreach to affinity groups and say, hey, you know what? We would love to have students come intern here. This is what we're offering, because it's a great way for the students to get wonderful experience. And so it's a win-win situation, right? It works for you. And it's a great way to try out to see is it a good fit for the student? Is it a good fit for the organization? Right. And when I say fit, for some people, you try something and it's just not what you're looking for, right? The interest isn't there. And others, it could be, wow, this is it. This is exactly what I love. So finding that connection is what I am referring to. It may not be somebody who's similar to you. It might be someone who's very different, but the connection's there, and that's exactly who you're looking for. And so when I refer to fit, that's what I was referring to, is building that connection and seeing, do you have that synergy there? You've got applicants that you hadn't thought about before, and now you're expanding your base, and you're, being more inclusive, and there's more diversity and all of those things.
Good afternoon, Karen and Denita. Thank you, by the way, for sharing your insights here. This is Michael Vogolo. I'm with Truist Financial. I really liked your discussion topics about the tolerance, the inclusion, and then moving into allyship and how that worked. And sometimes you often think when you're in these different groups, whether it's through work or what have you, that you do have certain individuals that feel they have to be part of that group, maybe so they are meeting that requirement either in their mind, I'm being socially responsible, I'm being diverse, but when they, they're kind of tolerating the fact that they have to be part of this group. What approach do you take when you're working with a group of 10, 15 individuals in a meeting or something, and you have some of those individuals that are there because they had to kind of sign up for it or else? Does that make sense, so to speak?
It does make sense. And so inclusion is a part of professional acumen. It just is, right? And so in working with people who seem resistant, right? I would focus on that professional acumen. What is your workplace expectation? What is the expectation for collaboration, for working together? So if Denita and I have to work on a project, and again, I'm just tolerating her, and you're my supervisor, and you notice that every time Denita shares an idea or a thought, I don't look at her, I don't turn that way, I don't respond, I don't take notes on her ideas, but I take notes on Chris's ideas, right? But Denita just seems like, from your observation, I'm tolerating her. Whatever the reason is that I'm just tolerating her, I am not demonstrating the greatest professionalism, right? And so sometimes it is really using those standards of professional acumen. What is your expectation in the workplace? Whether it is because of race or ability or sexual orientation or gender equity, the reason doesn't really matter, in that if your expectation is that we are a collaborative environment and that we work together to thrive for this purpose, and you see someone not doing that, that scary part is holding them accountable. This is what I've observed, and this is my expectation. Karen, I've observed you don't engage with Denita, so you're missing all of her ideas. I've hired her because I want her ideas, right? Like that's why you have Denita there. That's why you're paying her. So if I'm ignoring her, I'm defeating the whole purpose, right? And so holding people accountable and saying, I expect you to work with all of your colleagues is part of that professional acumen. And that's that part that sometimes people feel reluctant to say, this is what I've noticed. But really, if you've hired Denita, it's because you want her insight. And I'm hindering the whole purpose if I just sit next to her, but refuse to be inclusive. I'm actually harming the whole purpose of why you have her there. And so that would be my approach. And it's that expectation in the workplace. What do I expect of you? And are you fulfilling that expectation?
I couldn't agree with Karen more. That expectation in the workplace, I think that says it all. I think it also comes down to the leadership and the tone that the leadership sets as far as expectations when it comes to inclusion. and belonging. There's a Japanese proverb that I like to quote where it says, "A fish rots from the head." So, whatever that message that's being sent from the top, whatever that is, whether it be good or bad, that's what's going to filter through the organization. So the leadership has to set the tone, and depending on how strong a stance that organization takes on inclusion and belonging, perhaps it might be something that's incorporated into work evaluations, into performance evaluations. Maybe there's an expectation, going back to Karen's, what she said, maybe there's an expectation that's set in employee goals that pertains to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think the leadership can set the tone as far as what's tolerated, to use the word tolerated again, for what's tolerated in the workplace. Yeah, I think it starts with the top.
Well, Denita and Karen, I want to thank you so much. We have just 3 minutes left here, so I wanted to cover a couple of housekeeping items. If we were to continue this conversation through Penn State, I would imagine that Janine would have something to say about the vehicle by which that is done. So Janine, I saw you posted in the chat, but I wanted to give you a chance to speak a little bit about the Chamber and World Campus connection.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. I'm actually going to share my screen here quickly so that you can all see the landing page. So I just need to get this to, well, and of course I have too many things open, so I can't actually share the presentation, but you can all see what I'm showing there on the slide. We at Penn State World Campus, we have an Education Alliance partnership with the Chamber of Commerce. And through that partnership, that means that all member company employees, as well as their spouses and dependents, are eligible for a, thanks, Chris, tuition reduction. It's a 5% tuition reduction for Penn State World Campus online courses and programs. And Chris is taking you to the landing page right now. You can access this directly from the URL that I put in the chat. You can also access this directly from the Chamber website. So it's part of the Affinity program. You can see there, Penn State World Campus. You can just click there. It'll take you right to that landing page. If you do have employees or your spouse or dependent who are interested in attending Penn State, they can get all of the information here about our 150 plus programs that we offer online, fill out a request for more information, and it can walk you through the process of actually how to receive the tuition reduction. So I am always willing and able and available to help you and your employees if you need assistance in doing so. So thank you, Chris. Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Denita, all for, first of all, Chris, for hosting this, and for Denita and Karen, once again, providing an outstanding presentation in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you, Janine. And I just noticed, Karen, a question came in. Can we take 20 seconds to address that question? Is that okay with the group? Because it's a great question. How do you maintain inclusion without someone feeling like a token or someone else using that term? I think that's a great question. And from my own experience, I can tell you, I've been in environments where when it came time for photo ops, they wanted me in the front. When it came time for developing marketing materials, they wanted my face on it. But when it came time for like when I wanted to share a point of view, when I had a viewpoint that I felt needed to be expressed, my voice wasn't welcome. I would say that was an example of me feeling like a token. That was not inclusion. Inclusion is allowing me to have a voice. allowing me to contribute to the conversation, allowing me to have a seat at the table. I would say that's the difference between tokenism and feeling included. I did not feel included in a previous environment because I knew that it was just my face. It was just my appearance that was welcome, so that the organization could say that we have this. And all of the photo ops were arranged perfectly so that there were lots of boxes that could be checked. We have one of these, one of these, one of these, check, check, check. But our voices didn't matter. So I'm in an organization now with Penn State World Campus where I know my voice is welcome. I know my point of view is welcome. I'm not just a face. My ideas and my voice are appreciated as well. Sorry, I just had to throw that in there.
Thanks for sharing that, Denita. Really appreciate it. Karen, Denita, can't thank you enough for this. I hope that here in the future, we get another opportunity to connect, and perhaps the next time it'll be in person. We've got a bunch of great chamber events coming up. You already heard some of the things that were happening today in addition to this presentation. So again, thank you so much for doing this, and stay tuned to upcoming chamber events. Any final parting comments, Karen or Denita?
Just thank you for having us. This has been a pleasure, and I appreciate being here. So thank you.
Well, with that, the recording of this presentation will be posted to the Chamber's YouTube page. So if you wanted to go back and hear more of what Denita and Karen had shared to take that back to your own workplace, you're certainly able to do that. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.